Colossians 3:13. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. What I do like about that is it does immediately associate the two. But I'll move on from there. I like this one. 2 Timothy 2, verse 13. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. Now, in this case, I will say there's a couple different ways to interpret this. One could say faithless as though someone does not have faith, like someone literally does not believe in God, is not following God, is not trying to do anything like that, and that God is faithful to them anyway. And someone could look at a verse like that and say, well, clearly I don't even need to be a Christian to be saved. Like, you could interpret that way. But I will say the rest of the Bible is contradicting that interpretation. Yeah. What I take it to mean is that even when there are moments when we are not faithful to God, either through like sin or doubt, or just as I'm feeling right now, like I don't feel connected with God and I don't feel like he's enough. Like, God is bigger than my feelings, and he knows. There's a line in the movie Insomnia where Hilary Swank says to Al Pacino, I know that you're a good man even if you don't. Like, God knows that I am trying to follow him, and I'm trying to have faith in him, and sometimes it's just not working out because of human frailty. Yeah. But that does not affect his faithfulness to me. Yeah. And that is a statement, like, that's exactly the opposite of my concern with other people. That's if I wasn't a good friend to you or any of my other friends, that it's only a matter of time before they're like, all right, this is no longer worth it. He's faithless to me as a friend, and thus I will not be faithful to him. Like, God is saying that is not how I am. I do not work like that. Yeah.
I mean, there are so many passages in the Bible that are so comforting in that way, because it shows us that God does not act the way that people do, which, I don't know, can mean a lot for us, especially when we deal with issues like this, like fearing the way that people will judge us or treat us badly, or any number of things, negative things that can come from interpersonal relationships.
And I'll read a couple real quick. This is Matthew 24, verse 35. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. That's Jesus speaking. I think focusing, as I did earlier in talking about forgiveness, focusing on the limitlessness of God, I think, is helpful for me. The idea that, because ultimately what I'm saying is like, yes, God loves me, but now what? But do people love me? Because if people don't love me and God loves me, then who cares? And by emphasizing, like, heaven and earth will pass away, like, as valuable as my friends are, as valuable as relationships are, like, those people, whether they love me or not, they will pass away. But God will not. And so, in a sense, I always jump to guilt when I say what I'm about to say, but like, how am I valuing something that'll last 80 years over something that is literally forever? Like, how do I do that? Yeah.
And it's hard not to. I mean, any earthly things that we become attached to, it's because it's much easier to see the earthly benefits or to feel the earthly benefits. Yeah. I said empty benefits. Yeah.
Freudian slip there.
Yeah. But yeah, and that's one of those things, like you talked about earlier, the distinction between knowing something and feeling something. And that's one of those things that's a lot easier to know than it is to feel. It's a lot easier to be able to say that and believe it in your head than it is to experience it in your heart.
I will mention Psalm 136, verses 23 and 24. And if you read Psalm 136, you will find a phrase that repeats. It repeats here. He remembered us in our low estate. His love endures forever. And freed us from our enemies. His love endures forever. The phrase is his love endures forever. Again, perhaps one of the reasons that it's hard for me to, and people in general to accept this, is that we don't have a concept of forever. We think of it as a really long time.
Yeah.
And so, whereas I know what a day feels like, I know what a week, a month, a year feels like. And so we will value that which we understand over that which we don't.
Yeah.
Not merely understand, but have also experienced. And so, so the idea of God's love enduring forever, it's like, oh, that's neat. You said a bunch of stuff that has no practical application to my life, as opposed to if you were to say, Tyler, I hate you right now. I'd be like, got it. I know exactly what you mean. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go sleep for a week.
Yeah, I know exactly what that means for my life. Whereas something like God's love endures forever is something that it's hard to think of what that means for our life.
Yeah.
And probably most specifically because we're not able to grasp an idea of anything being forever, which goes back to something that you were saying at the beginning of the show, which is that people have limits, and God doesn't have limits, and it's hard for us to understand. I think we can't understand what it means for something to not have limits.
Right.
That's one thing that's always fascinated and kind of terrified me at the same time, the idea of something being infinite or limitless. And you remember, like, back when, I don't know if you ever heard this when you were a kid, but when people would talk about, like, how long God's been around, and they say, you know, oh, he's been around forever, and like infinity. And you're like, well, how long is that? And people would say, like, this specific one sticks in my mind because it's so stupid when I think about it now. It was like, well, imagine there's like a concrete block the size of the ocean, and there's a bird that's pecking at it. It would take longer than it takes for that bird to peck through that concrete, peck up that entire concrete block. Infinity's longer than eternity's longer than that.
It's like, yeah, but that bird will eventually get there.
Right.
Like, that's finite.
That's still a limited thing.
Yeah.
And the idea of trying to explain infinity in terms of time is nonsense.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. But sorry, I shouldn't have gone off that rabbit trail.
That's
but fine. You were talking before about people having limits, and God not having limits is something that it's very hard for us to grasp. And so it's hard for us to experience God's love as big as it is because we are thinking of things in terms of limits, because that's the way that we know things. And the idea struck me when I was talking about it earlier in the episode, but I hadn't really thought of it before, is that the desire that the joy that, or I guess the appeal that Theodore sees in confiding in Samantha and in being intimate and open with Samantha is that idea of an unlimited love, an unlimited acceptance.
Yeah.
And that is what we get from God. And that's there's a reason that people desire that, because that's part of the way we're built, because that's part of the way that God created us. He created us desiring him, desiring that unlimited relationship, that relationship that we know, that I shouldn't say we know, but that relationship that in reality is not going to judge us, is never can never be that 51-49 thing.